Well, my next guest says there are more election unknowns this presidential election cycle than at any other time since World War II. I'm talking about Terry Haines. He is the principal at Pangaea Policy, and he joins us now for a conversation. I want to begin with early voting because that is clearly a trend that we're seeing that's different this year. Terry, a week before Election Day, we have already seen 64 million Americans vote, about half in battleground states. But what can we realistically draw from that? Does it mean that we're seeing a greater turnout for Democrats, Republicans? How do we interpret this? And what is the significance of that unknown?
The bottom line is that we have no idea, Jessica. We just don't know. Are people early voting because they're more Democratic than Republican? We don't know. Are people voting because they enjoy the convenience of voting early? Probably a lot of them are, but we just don't know how much. And also, when you compare current trends to, which are still ongoing, of course, to what happened in 2016, 2012, and the like, you can't draw a real clear picture from the ongoing early voting right now.
Terry, let me go now to the black vote. I mean, right before the last presidential debate, we saw this Rasmussen poll that got a lot of Twitter coverage that had black vote at 25% for Trump and going all the way up now to 46% just after that presidential debate. A lot has been made of that Rasmussen poll, even though it's likely an outlier. How important, though, is the black vote and turning out additional black voters for the Trump campaign in terms of how it could really change the dynamic here?
In the context of individual states, the black vote is very important. Let me take as one example Pennsylvania, in part because it provides me with numbers that are easy to remember. Pennsylvania has about 12 million people in it. Blacks are about 1/10 of the population of Pennsylvania. So you get 12 million people, you get 1.2 million blacks. Assuming that blacks come out at the same average and have the same intensity as the broader population, using 2016 numbers, you're going to get 55 to 60% of the black population of Pennsylvania to come out. So you're looking at 600 to 700,000 votes in a state that Trump carried in 2016 by about 40,000 votes. So, the black vote has the opportunity to swing the election one way or the other.
And also has the potential even to replace some of the lost votes of the white female educated suburban voters
Sure,
that put him over the edge in Pennsylvania
sure, absolutely. If
4
you
years
get
ago.
a situation, exactly. If you get a situation where other demographics, as you point out, so sort of, like white college educated men or women or somebody else aren't as intense about Biden, don't want to come out as much. If the black community is much more intense about Biden and Harris, or conversely, wants to come out for Trump in some way, that's a great help. And conversely, if they feel like they're not enthusiastic about either candidate and they stay home, that also has an important impact. And what we know about the 2016 election is that despite a lot of attempts by the Clinton campaign to provide that intensity and spark, it didn't happen. And after two opportunities to vote for Barack Obama, Clinton had fewer black votes, and there was much less intensity. Even though they won about the 9-to-1 percentage, the fact that nobody comparatively in that community nobody cared about Clinton, may have been decisive in a number of states, and that's the big reason why Trump is going after the black vote with such alacrity, number one. And number two, why Biden is aggressively trying to defend it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because speaking of Pennsylvania, I have family that lives there too, some of whom were in the same town where the recent Trump rally took place in central Pennsylvania. And you've talked about another unknown is the impact of these economic lockdowns, and particularly in states like Pennsylvania, there was a backlash. I know, at least in the community where my family lives, there was an incredible backlash against the idea that their county, which is very red, was the last to be opened up, and they felt that this was more politically motivated than it was motivated by the numbers. So, how much are these economic lockdowns, particularly in states run by Democrats, which Trump has been very careful to label as the cause of the more strict lockdowns? Is that resonating, and is that a big enough unknown to turn the election?
Well, to my mind, it's a huge unknown. And, as former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld might say, it's not only a known unknown, it's an unknown unknown, in the sense that and nobody really
Pretty
understands.
unknown, Terry.
It's in the sense that nobody really understands the impact at all. But I thought it was. I think it's a huge deal. I think you're quite right about Pennsylvania. I think and you can extrapolate that to Michigan and a few other places. I think it would have. By the way, I think it would have a great deal of impact in a place like Pennsylvania or a place like Michigan, where you had Democratic governors really putting down hard lockdowns and getting a huge amount of not only backlash from the citizenry, but backlash from elected politicians as well. Pennsylvania, for example, is a place where you have a Democratic governor, but you have a Republican majority legislature, which has been very frustrated about its inability to try to get the lockdowns curbed, to end the state of emergency, all the rest. So it's become not only a very large, but a very politicized shutdown in that way. And I have not seen anyone. The reason I say it's an unknown, I've not seen anyone attempt to measure that, to say to citizens, in Pennsylvania, for example, is it more important to you now to get out there and go for Trump, or be in favor of the Republican challenger in your congressional district, as a result of the way that the lockdowns were handled? But it's provided an awful lot of political energy there, and instinctively, I would think that would go for Trump. But on the other hand, in a place like Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs, it may provide a lot of energy the other way too. It may provide, people who are thankful that Governor Wolf provided these serious lockdowns. They may be grateful for that, may want them to continue, and may vote more blue as a result. You just don't know.
Let's talk about the economic bounce back. Obviously, President Trump has been very clear. He believes it's a V recovery. Larry Kudlow saying the same thing. Former Vice President Biden says it's going to be more like a K recovery. Why does it matter? And what kinds of voters are motivated by this type of assertion of what kind of recovery we're getting here?
The alphabet soup matters because it plays into the party's narratives. What President Trump has said and continues to say is that I took over and the economy was moribund. First time we'd had a presidency that never had an over 3% growth rate. Our task was to get the economy roaring along. I did that for a lot of ways, tax legislation and a bunch of other things. We got hit with the coronavirus. Things fell off a cliff, but now we're shooting back much faster than most people would think. But his message will always be very inclusive and say that everybody's being helped. What Democrats who rely on income inequality and inequality generally as a messaging point, and I don't mean to demean it by saying that, but it is a messaging point for the party generally, for its standard bearers, that income equality is manifested in the K-shaped recovery that allows the well-off to bounce back quickly, while the not so well-off are continuing to nosedive, and that's what it is. I think both parties would do better if they stopped alphabet soup, frankly, because what they're doing is they're talking internally to a very small group that understands the jargon and the economic speak. But that's what they're trying to say, is that the economic recovery is still leaving people behind. So therefore, this provides another opportunity to vote blue this fall if you want that to change.
What about the reports of this other unknown that you haven't written about, but it's this idea that you can change your vote? I mean, there was this Google trending search in the last 7 days. A lot of people in swing states are Googling, how do I change my vote?
What I understand, I'm not going to be the legal expert on this, but what I understand is there's about 7 states, including a few battlegrounds, including Pennsylvania, where there are actually processes to go change your vote. But in most places, you can't. I mean, once you're done, you're done.
But to your point, if it comes down to Pennsylvania, this could be a critical question to know the answer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah,
Mind blowing.
no, absolutely, yeah. We're not quite done in Pennsylvania either. The Supreme Court, I'm going to try to do this in English. The United States Supreme Court recently refused to intervene on an appeal of whether the Pennsylvania Supreme Court could actually, continue to count ballots and that they received late, and they refused to intervene. It's thought because they tied 4-4. So now you've got just a newly minted Justice Barrett on the court as it goes back up to full strength, number one. But number two, Pennsylvania just a couple of days ago filed to have the court rehear it on the merits, as opposed to and judging by a Wisconsin ruling that happened yesterday, there might be a greater possibility that the court takes it up. So you might get some, one of the things that might happen in November, if it's close enough, is you might get some U.S. Supreme Court oversight on Pennsylvania voting process.
Oh my gosh. So that's even another unknown that you haven't written about, is the
Yeah.
whole state of play in the courts. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to stop before we get to 12 because this is already a lot to download. One thing is for sure, though, I think it's fair to say that everybody agrees that polling is on the ballot, just the whole industry of polling. We believe that it'll be something we can trust in going forward if it gets it right, and if it doesn't, all of those famous pollsters are probably going to have to go back to the drawing board. But I'm going to leave it there. Terry Haines from Pangaea Policy, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm very happy to do it. Thank you.
You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. I'm Jessica Stone.